to Switzerland, and it is thought that almost 1 million soldiers died in the Battle of Verdun, both German and primarily French, some British and some Americans. Um, we have here not very many shards because the damage that was done in World War I, not in World War II. We entered almost unopposed into the city of Verdun. Only the bridges had been blown. I did find some shards from this earlier war, both from the Catholic cathedral in the town and from the poor little, mean little Protestant church, and from the Jewish synagogue. I don't know whether the Jewish synagogue, it may have been wrecked by the Germans in their effort to obliterate everything that was Jewish. But I did find these 3 little shards, and because in the American Army we all worked happily together, I thought it would be nice to have them together.
Yes.
Okay, hold 1 second, Armelle. Can you take that bag and move it away from me?
I know. So basically, on that piece, there is 3 shards. There is a story which tells us about 3 different temples. So there is kind of synchronicity there. 3 pieces and 3 different temples and churches.
Yes.
And so also Verdun, like you mentioned, is all about World War I at start. So the idea is about repetition of his story.
Yes, yes.
And in your story, you mentioned also the idea of a church choir, So there is a reference to choir. Sorry, it's hard for me to say chores, like music.
Choir.
Choir.
Choir. Oh, yes, yes, yes.
Sorry.
Okay, so
Yes.
why don't you pick up again, sir? Also, you were mentioning, just start at the top of that.
And also you were mentioning a story about the choir. I'm sorry.
Choir,
Okay,
yes.
we're going to do it one more
Choir.
time now. Choir.
Choir.
So start up at the top of the
Yes.
sentence. Go ahead.
And you were mentioning also something about choirs.
Yes. We had a little Protestant church choir led by our Red Cross officer, and we have a picture of that, Armelle, should you want to use it. The Jewish synagogue, happily, in our psychological warfare department of General Bradley's headquarters, we had a bright young Jewish officer named Jaffe, and he sort of led the Jewish group, and he was most helpful. He got a group of soldiers together to spruce up the synagogue and freshen it up, and it was used regularly by our Jewish soldiers during the time that we were in Verdun, which was for about half a year.
Indeed.
Okay, right now we're going to go back to your describing.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I'm sorry I went
No,
out of it because
it's okay.
I needed to.
But it was an interesting.
It's a story of the.
Just keep saying the name of the panel. Like,
Yeah.
Say at Verdun.
At Verdun, we have different events, and the story talk about the 3 temple and the story of music also. So I kind of decide to do that musical partition of notes. But if you are a musician, which I'm not, you don't understand. You can't play those notes really. It doesn't mean anything, and that means to me that war doesn't mean anything. The bottom line is that in a way it just means destruction. So that's why those notes don't mean anything for a musician to play. but also use the sign of repetition, so you can repeat and repeat those notes which don't
I
mean
see,
anything.
yes.
Because in Verdun,
I
actually,
see, yes.
we had a repetition of his stories. The war hit it twice, you know, it's those kind of places.
Yes.
Can you say, instead of the three temples, can you say the three, what would be a general term for church, temple,
Yeah,
and
just three
the three places of worship?
religious sites.
Yeah, the three, there are three places of worship. Why don't you
yes.
say that?
Three
Just say that.
religious edifices or religious shrines, you might say.
So in the story, we make a reference to three different religious sites.
Yes.
There is three shards, and should I repeat myself? I probably explained enough, no?
I'm just trying to make you make sense, because I'm thinking
Yeah,
about how to edit
it's
you.
hard for me because
'Cause
of
I know it's hard, and it's
I-
okay if you repeat it to
I
us out
think
loud,
it's
because you're speaking
nice
English
to
as
bring
well.
in the note of ecumenicity here. One Catholic.
Fred, okay, so why don't you talk about so again, what's the
Yes.
name of the place?
Verdun.
Okay, so let's
Yes.
let him,
Verdun,
okay, go
yeah.
ahead. At Verdun.
At Verdun, this great fortress city, which had been subjected to so many wars from the days when the Huns, in about the 5th century, first invaded France to our own time. Here we have nonetheless a sense of the ecumenicity, of harmony between three faiths. There's one shard representing the Catholic cathedral, another representing this little obscure Protestant minority, the third representing a Jewish synagogue, all happily placed by you, Armelle, in this nice arrangement of the notes using the musical symbol, which means they can be repeated over and over again. How sad it is that war has been so much a part of mankind that in this town of Verdun, we see it happening again and again and again. Thank you for the special work you've done on that symbol,
Okay,
on that shard.
everybody hold 1 second, I just want to shut the door. Armelle, that was great.
For our time to talk about that piece correctly.
Which one, Verdun?
Yeah.
But you know, it's better to have him do it,
Mm-hmm.
because then we'll have his voice, but to have a little bit of you and more of him it's going to work for the piece.
Yeah, Verdun was hard. But okay, next one is St. John Red Lion Square in London.
Yes, yes.
And this piece is special too. I guess each piece is special, but there is
Yes,
also.
yes.
So if you can tell me about like the story, kind of,
Yes.
And is there anything you want to just remind him of before he starts?
Just remind you like the envelope. Why did you put the shard in that envelope? And we're gonna talk about the
Yes,
controversy
yes.
of the piece.
Yes.
Like
What should we do? Should I move out of the way and you be more here?
No. Sarah, don't worry about it.
Can I see? Oh, that's
would it be better if I sit right there? You know what I mean? So you could go like that, maybe, or sit. No.
okay.
No, I was just telling
She's
her
just
about
telling
the
me
background.
something that
I know.
you know, this is going to be you're going to be a famous movie star.
You think so?
I think so, because I'm just trying to. Should we cheat the? Should we move the bookcase so that?
Sarah, let's not start.
Okay. So why don't you start by naming the place and tell Armelle about it?
Yeah. Now this is before the war, I had visited London several times, and there was a church that I particularly loved. It was the Church of St. John the Baptist in Red Lion Square, London. When I went back on leave in June of 45, the war had just ended, I made my way to Red Lion Square, looking for the church. Nothing but a heap of rubble. You could walk over the rubble. And in doing so, I found the few shards of glass that you see on this panel. I picked them up, and I also saw an envelope, damp amongst the stones. I picked up this envelope and put the shards into the envelope, and there they remained until they were received by Armelle LaRue to put into a panel. The envelope is an advertisement for a certain kind of hair wash, and in a way, it's sort of tells us the ephemeral quality of the civilization it represented just before the war, so much of which disappeared. Probably shortly after the war began, that business went out of work as there were shortages and people were rationed this and that. So it's just a little symbol of the ordinary life of the people that disappeared at the time that the church disappeared.
Yes. It's also.
Okay, wait. Oh, we're going to let him keep going.
okay.
And then
No,
we're gonna
I
go.
don't have anything
And
more to say.
do you want to prompt him to talk about anything else? Because you're doing great, Armelle.
Okay, I'd like just to mention the controversy about that piece.
Okay, can Fred talk about it then?
Do you want to talk about
Oh,
Okay.
well, I don't know that I do. I do remember, Armelle, that one friend whom I showed this thought that it should not be in the panel because she thought it was a cheap little thing, such as like throwing away the wrapping of a Hershey bar or something of that sort. But it's for that very reason that I thought it ought to be associated with how war not only destroys good things, it destroys the ordinary aspects of life as people go on day by day living their lives. That's why I thought it not inappropriate that it should be there.
Can you say what it is?
It's just a little envelope, I suppose, containing some powder or something for washing hair. Isn't that what it
was
is?
a sterilized human hair. That's what the envelope
Oh, it's
says.
Okay.
sterilized.
Let him say it, because I'm going to have to cut it in because he keeps saying it. Okay, so go ahead.
Oh.
Just say what it is.
Oh, it was a sterilized human hair net, was it? For keeping hair in place. I see. Yes.
Okay, good.
All
I'm
right.
just. Okay.
And that's
Bear
where
with
the
us, you don't-
controversy comes too, because when
Okay,
people
okay,
realize human
wait,
hair.
I'm gonna have her come out here, and she's
Okay,
gonna
sorry.
do. Okay. So now talk about the hair and say what it is. Don't use the word it. Say that the envelope or the envelope in what's it called?
The envelope is called Sterilized Human Hair Paradise Net. It's an advertising actually for that, representing a woman, very 40s actually, blonde woman. But in the concept of the war, to me, when you read Sterilized Human Hair, which is a legal business, you can't help to think of concentration camp, I think, with the market of teeth and gold teeth, you know.
yes.
So there is a heavy meaning in that envelope, which I found related to that. And I asked different people, and they kind of felt that way. And that's why it was important to use it, because it represents futility, like you mentioned, but also something a little more heavy than that also.
Ah, yes,
Do you
yes,
see what?
yes. Now let's not record this. Let's not put.
Hey.
No, we don't have
Periers,
to, but
Normandie.
we'll do it for a while longer. Yeah.
Remember, there were just two shards
Oh, Perier.
and the mirror and the
Yes.
piece of wood we burned too. So,
Oh, yes.
so maybe you can talk about the story of.
Perier was my first introduction to army life in Europe. I had flown from London to Isigny, a little town in Normandy near Bayeux. I remember we drove from the airfield past that remarkable old abbey church in Bayeux with its famous oh goodness, now here I'm messing everything up, with its famous embroidered work by Queen Matilda of the French landing in Britain in 1066. And we drove on to this little town of Periers and out into an apple orchard where General Bradley's rear headquarters was located. The town, of course, had been badly damaged in the fighting that was associated with the Battle of Saint-Lô, which was the first occasion when Allied troops were able to break out of the area they had seized in the Normandy landings on the 6th of June. In the evening, after reporting in, I walked into this village, which it was such a saddening experience. The little houses on the edge of the town were all blown to pieces. The streets were full of rubble. The church itself seemed badly shattered. I walked around and saw some stained glass on the ground. It was the first that I had seen, and so I stooped down and picked some up, and that was the start of my collection. In leaving the church to walk back to our camp, I saw a lone individual in civilian dress. He was standing on top of what had once been a house or a shop. He was shoveling away at the stone. What he was looking for, I can, of course, have no idea. But he looked up and he saw me. Now, everywhere we went in France, we were joyfully received by the French people. But he did not look joyful in any sense at all. He looked at me with some distaste because I think I represented the military. I represented war, which had destroyed everything that he had underneath his feet. I had a strong sense of sympathy for him and felt it was a most useful encounter for myself. End of words.
Okay, Fred, could you just talk about, okay, it was the first time you had just arrived when you saw that church. How did you feel, and why did you pick up the glass? Can you just, and use my question in your answer if you can.
Yeah, well, naturally, you hate to see a church destroyed because it's the symbol of man's aspirations. And What was the second part?
I just want to know how did you feel and why did you pick up the glass?
Oh, well, I picked up the glass because I felt this is something that I should remember. I picked up the shards. In fact, all of the shards I collected were for purposes of remembrance, because it's so often a little thing that can bring back a flood of memories into your head. And that's why I picked it up.
And
Will that do?
how old were you when you were there?
I was 34 years of age, yes.
And it was the first time you had ever seen war like that?
Yes, it
Can
was.
you use my question? Say it as a full sentence.
Yes, it was my first experience of how obliterating war can be to the efforts of mankind. And the shards represented something deep that you ought to remember about this.
Anything else you should talk about for this panel? And before we go to move the camera to you, anything else you think he should mention? Because it helps when you...
No, basically the story is what he said. And now he can explain why we did that, maybe.
Who's he or you?
What do you prefer? What do you think?
It's nice to hear him, and then we'll go to you.
Okay.
If you think he... Yeah.
Let me ask Armelle. Armelle, how did you happen to put this shard onto a piece of wood and shaped in this way? Where did you get the wood?
Okay, hold one second. Armelle, can you move quite a bit closer and
Okay.
actually even, like, sit at the edge
Yeah.
there? Is that going to help, Claire? And look at him and open up the...
I should
open
maybe
up
be lower.
No, it's okay. Do you want to come over here? No, okay. Okay, so Armelle, you're going to talk about it?
Yeah. As Fred just mentioned in the story, he sees that man whose house is destroyed. And I found that piece of wood for Perier actually in a trash. And it was already cut that way, and the only work I did on it was to burn it really heavily with fire to make it look like a really
I see,
destroyed
like the
piece.
burning from a bomb.
And the suggestion that it could have been a piece of the shard, but of course you didn't pick a piece of wood from that man house. But there is also those two shards, you just picked two shards from Perier. And
Yes.
those two shards are symbolic of human construction. It's almost like a menhir also, like a standing stone. And I surrounded the glass with mirror. So when you're gonna see the piece, you're gonna see first the piece burn of wood, and then you go closer and you're gonna see your eye in the mirror. So it's a notion of guilt. It's like, what is a man's responsibility in a war, individually and socially or military? Everybody is guilty or not. It's that, so you see your eyes and what's your responsibility in that, war effort or what it's called. And the text is engraved like almost like somebody has written something on the wood. And so it's a pretty rough piece, according to your story.
I think it's splendid, Armelle. Read what the text says to us.
Unfortunately,
You want to have Fred do it?
we can't read it.
Oh, you can't read it.
It's too small. I don't
Oh,
have
I
it.
see.
But
Yes.
we can do it another time
Okay.
when we have it.
Yeah, we will.
Yeah.
And maybe we'll bring all the text and we'll have him read them all. or
Yes,
something.
yes.
Yeah, that's fun.
'Cause
But
he's
basically
such a
the
beautiful
story
way
he
he's-
says,
he-
what he says is a story actually. You already said the story, but
Oh, with the
Oh, I think that's a
Yes.
very happy piece.
Mm.
Yes, very happily done, I mean. Yes. All right.
Okay, do you like the angle where you are for the two of them, or do you want me to move up? Do you want me to be...
Next one is what?
Verviers.
Verviers. Oh, yes. Yes, yes.
So Fred, you remember Fervière? This is also a very specific story. Can you tell us
Yes.
about it?
Well, Verviers is in Belgium. It's in eastern Belgium. And once again, I was driving to some point and had to stop there for the night. We always had an officer in towns of size who would take care of assigning you to a place where you could stay for the night. In this case, he assigned me to the home of a small Belgian family where they had one vacant room that they let out to traveling soldiers, properly assigned to their place. And in this case, there was a woman, I think she was the only member of her family there then. She had a son who had been seized by the Germans and transported to Germany to work in their armament industry. It's what we came to know of as slave labor. And so here I was assigned to his room, and it was as if he had just left yesterday or that afternoon. There were pictures on the wall of his athletic interests. There were books that he had chosen that he liked to read. There were even his civilian clothes in the clothes closet.
Instead of saying him, can you say this boy or this woman's son?
Yes, this woman's son had these treasured objects that he loved in his room, and I felt like I was the invader, that this all belonged to him. But where was this young Belgian lad? Was he in southern Germany, or was he working down in Plesty in the oil fields for the German war machine? Would he ever come back? No one could know. Looking out of the window of the room, as I remember it, there was a Roman Catholic church on a little plaza, and I think it was dedicated to Mary, the mother of Jesus, because there was a statue of Mary with her arms open in this fashion. And the people of the town, in their unhappiness because of the war, would sometimes gather before this church because they believed they could see one of her arms move once in a while. It was kind of a reassuring thing for them. That's all that I have to say.
So what does that have to do with those shards?
Well, it's just that you could see this from, as I remember, the window of the room where I was staying. It doesn't really have anything to do with it. That part can be excerpted if you want to.
No, that's okay. I like it. The story's beautiful, but where are the shards from in this panel?
From the church alongside, as I remember it. Yes.
So it's the church that you saw at
Yes,
your window?
yes,
Okay, so
yes.
Can you just explain that then?
Yes.
Just say I went?
Yes. I believe the shards came from this church, which was right close by this little house where I was staying, because there had been some damage in Verviers, although not very much.
And so you went to that church and took the shards from
That's
there.
right. That's my memory. Yes.
No,
And I notice, Armelle, that here you have a person seemingly going down an endless road that suggests what might have been the course for this person whose room it was.
Yes, it is. It's a representation of the little boy.
And there were, of course, hundreds of thousands of people who had that experience. the Germans just scooped up people. You'd be walking along the street and somebody would simply take you and put you in a car and you were not seen anymore. Mm-hmm.
And that's what the piece represents. Even though the shards come from the church he saw by the window, the piece is about that slave labor kids. Basically,
Yes,
was
yes.
probably very young.
Yes.
And I put the shards in the shape of a little puppet. So it's the idea of manipulation of history, how people are manipulated like a puppet.
Very good.
And he is on a little road where you end
Yes.
your story saying, would he ever return? And it's surrounded by